So, did you work very closely with Jim Clark there?
Yeah, no, well, I was aware of Jim Clark, and he was, he was such a kid, like the most brilliant guy in the world. And then there was always like Jim would say something like, and I would be like, wow, that's kind of crazy. And that was Jim. He was like both completely a genius, and then, but he had he was kind of a volatile. He was not manageable. He was his first kind of instance that I understood of a guy who was completely brilliant, but he wasn't somebody who was going to be managed and directed by the CEO. He was his own thing. So I got a little taste of that. And everybody loved him there. I mean, they loved Jim Clark at Silicon Graphics, all the engineers at least.
Mm-hmm. So, okay, we didn't mean to keep the phone on that way. How would you compare Jim Clark in that respect to other Valley CEOs and founders since? Because a lot of people describe other founders that way, but my understanding is Jim Clark was sort of in a league of his own.
Yeah, he, I knew him a bit, and then I knew him a lot through Mark, through the stories, and then I knew him more at Netscape. Yeah, Jim was more extreme. He was both smarter than a lot of the he was really smarter than anybody almost. I mean, here's a guy who completely revolutionized computer graphics. I mean, when he was a professor at Stanford. And Silicon Graphics was so far ahead of its time. And so he really, really was a genius. But then he was also super volatile. I give, trying to think of, I give a couple of stories. So one was, I had just done this deal with Sun Microsystems when I was at Netscape, and I had put the deal all together for them to OEM basically all our products. And it was a big deal and a lot of money, and I was the product manager, and I was really excited. And they call me up the day after we do the deal, for them to carry all our software. And they're furious because Jim Clark, in his keynote at Comdex, said, they asked him, well, what do you think about Sun's software efforts, which was basically our software? And Jim says, oh, that's like a zebra trying to lose its stripes with paint. And so they were like, what is he doing? So that was Jim. That was kind of one of the kinds of things he said. And then I'll never forget one time he comes into the cafeteria, and I'm at that time I was an executive, and he sits down at the table and he's like, Ben, what are we going to do about the stock price? And it was a shocking question for me because I wasn't that senior. What could I do about the stock price? He's like, I need to have $1 billion after taxes. In front of all the employees and everything, and I'm just going, wow, that's probably going to be a little demotivating. But it was Jim, he just said whatever was on his mind, and sometimes it was the most genius thing of all times, and sometimes it was stuff like that.
So when you see entrepreneurs come in now as a VC and they have that Jim Clark essence, do you back them or do you not back them? Because there's obviously good and bad about it.
Yeah, so we really believe strongly, and this is something that took me a long time to learn, but we believe very strongly in strength over lack of weakness. So we'd much rather take somebody with a great strengths and horrible weaknesses, which often go together, than somebody who is very good across the board. And Jim was certainly you'd back Jim Clark all day long, every day of the week with all of his issues. Now, and he understood very well his limitations. He never wanted to be CEO or, although he was CEO of Netscape for a short while, but it wasn't his long-term plan, and he wasn't CEO of Silicon Graphics very long either, because he knew he was, he had that explosive personality. But you trade that because, best in world. If you can get somebody who's best in world, either as a hire or a founder or anything like that, that's what's required to build a great technology company. This isn't an old company. You're not going to work for, Walmart or something like that that's more established. You've got to build something out of nothing and beat everybody in the world. So for that, you need greatness, and you'll deal with issues for greatness.